We are ready to go with our first match of the day. It is going to be xBlyzes versus Thijs, and it's going to be a huge one because, one, we have the powerhouse that is xBlyzes been impressing us, not only just in Grandmasters, of course, but his road to Grandmasters was one of the most impressive feats we've ever seen in Hearthstone, but also Thijs. Honestly, I imagine his legion of fans are ecstatic to see him in the top cut with like 2 weeks in a row in the opening of Grandmasters Season 2. Thijs, obviously one of the biggest Hearthstone streamers we have, and it's cool that, again, we do mention this, but him being, streams so many hours a day, super entertaining, and then just rocks up to GM and just crushes it. It's very, very impressive. And Thijs, I think, he's one of the oldest players in terms of how long he's been playing and been involved in the competitive scene, but he isn't going anywhere anytime soon, right, Sol?
Very true. It's a similar story for both him and RDU, of course, G2 teammates, and whoever's, doing G2 scouting process for them to see who they're going to pick up, clearly doing a very good job because they've got two huge streamers. But also this season, in contrast to last, they're both off to an incredibly good start, showing that, when it comes to competition, they can still absolutely mix it up with the absolute best. And they've got incredible legacies throughout Hearthstone. If they can continue to maintain their position as GMs and continue to perform well in this, that legacy is just going to extend further and further.
It is, and xBlyzes is the one who wants to kick off or continue his own legacy here. And his lineup is looking, I think, all right versus Thijs, honestly. I was just glancing, as you have no doubt, at Thijs' Demon Hunter list, the Soul Demon Hunter, and there are a couple of pitfalls that he's kind of slipped into, and not really his choice, obviously, but going against xBlyzes' lineup. For example, he's running double Acidic Swampooze in his Demon Hunter. And now, once he's banned Warrior, well, there's nothing to ooze, right? So he's looking at two, basically Bloodflame Raptors that I imagine if he has to draw them, he'll probably want to draw them on curve, right? To just try and just throw them down versus the decks that xBlyzes has got left. So there are some holes here. And even though I love Demon Hunter, I think that might be one of the struggling moments here for Thijs.
Yeah, I agree. Hello? Yeah.
Thijs releasing a rap album at some point in the near future, and this is just promotion?
I mean, I guess xBlyzes and Thijs rhyme, so I guess Thijs is just going to take that scheme and drop the most fire mixtape of 2020. Like, I have no idea. But yes, I think
there was a black and white filter over the camera or something. It would look so sick. Sorry, carry on.
But yeah, I think there are some potential holes. I think that's one that's kind of been exposed here, is that if Thijs wants to ban Warrior anyway, how common is a lineup where Warrior is the only weapon class, as xBlyzes has come with here? And I would argue probably not very. I think, weapon destruction is by no means a bad call here. But you are seeing a certain weakness being exploited, I guess, in the overall tech strategy of Thijs' lineup.
Yeah, and even once again, Thijs is running the ooze in his priest, whereas it looks like xBlyzes just isn't, at least at a glance, not running any weapon removal, so no weapon respect. And although there's the whole thing around xBlyzes' Druid, I do think he's took the approach of, well, if I'm planning on banning Warrior, kind of like you said, he might have thought, well, yeah, even if there's just one other weapon class, it's last hero standing, you've only got to be it the once, right?
Yeah, and I think, honestly, xBlyzes' lineup choices have been a huge part of his success. A part of his success that probably not enough people have talked about, how consistently he's turned up to a Masters Tour or whatever other tournament, and he's just had the best lineup. And that doesn't happen by accident. That happens by a lot of testing and just having a deep understanding of the metagame and what it looks like. So, again, Druid submission aside, I do generally think that xBlyzes is pretty on point.
So, this is a priest mirror.
They
are both playing Highlander as well, so it is as close to a priest mirror. There's some tech cards that we mentioned. So, especially with Highlander, do you think it's, we were talking about the aggressive options and stuff from priest actually in some other games. In the priest Highlander mirror, are you expecting that, or are you expecting much more of a slower, late game value/control-y kind of plan?
So I think we saw yesterday a pretty prototypical example of how I see this matchup play out now, which is it kind of looks like the same matchup, but there's just a few tools. Both decks are a little more tempo heavy than they used to be, because they kind of lean dragons a little bit, which kind of naturally creates slightly more mid-rangey threats. Yep. And then on top of that, the addition of Mindrender creates the ability for either player to just kind of board lock a position where they know their hand can't deal with the amount of pressure that they have, so they just give their hand to the opponent, and then they can potentially set up lethal. So I think there are opportunities to be more aggressive, more mid-rangey in this matchup now, and we saw Thijs doing that saw RDU doing that to great effect yesterday, playing recklessly aggressive, like even more aggressive than I was expecting to. And it paying off in the end. You know, there were, 8 cards left in the deck when the match ended in the Priest Mirror that we saw yesterday, which doesn't sound fast, but in terms of the legacy of Priest Mirrors, absolutely is.
I really do think it is a personal preference as well. I know there'll be people who argue, oh no, this is the correct way to play. You know, whether it is that aggressive push at the moment with the Mind Render, or whether you just play a more standard, slower, value-based plan. But I do think certain players will lean one way or the other with what they would prefer to do. Obviously, the cards don't always play nice, but Thijs getting an extra raised dead earlier on was actually a pretty big deal, as that is not only insane value, but there are some huge hits you can get from that, whether it's the typical, you know, like the Zephyrus, or not so much relevant here, but you know, like weapon removal potential too, but just any of the big value cards, getting the raised dead off, hitting them would be gigantic.
Headmaster Kalthazar drawn here as well, which I will be watching like a hawk from this point.
after earlier?
Yeah, because I think we saw what was a very broken interaction happen in APAC, so I definitely am quite interested in keeping an eye on this card in particular.
Really nice Mind Flayer cards though for xBlyzes, and xBlyzes is starting to pile on that pressure. Although he's leaving the Netherwing for Thijs on his side of the board, xBlyzes is actually being quite aggressive, and as always, I feel the Cabal Acolyte is just an huge pain to deal with. Not only the steal effect with the help from its spell burst, of course, but just a 2/6 just is so sticky, especially with the potential priest healing or buffs, that it really is a huge speed bump for anything Thijs will want to do. And speaking of Headmaster Kalthazar, are there actually any good plays or targets in the Priest Mirror? Because normally you want to do like the Shadowwood Rune, right? Which is the big payoff. But how often is Priest actually... There we go. We fixed the cameras, guys. We're all good. How often does Priest set up any kind of big sort of steals like that, or generation, should I say?
I think it happened more often than you might expect. Ignore that voice crack. We'll just move straight past that.
I think it will happen.
Let's just go back and have another look there. But like I said, because they're leaning dragons a little bit now, the matchup is a little bit more mid-rangey than you might expect. So there are like a lot of like 6 to 8 attack minions that do kind of get generated in the mid-game. You can see even like these Dragonmaw Skystalkers, right? Like if there was just a Headmaster Kalthazar Shadow Death, for example, like that on its own would be a very, very swingy turn. So I think it does happen perhaps more often than you might expect. It's not a card that I'm really convinced by yet overall, the Headmaster, even in Priest. But we'll wait and see if it can impress me.
Yeah, with the depth of just frankly crazy cards that are in Scholarmance right now, there's a lot of options in these Highlander decks to experiment, right? Just to see what really does get the job done. We're going to see a Dragonmaw Skystalker come out once again for Thijs. And there's the Wave of Apathy committed, and not to a great effect, I would say. Obviously, it's good not being traded off on board, but we've seen Wave of Apathy do pretty huge.
Yeah, it's just a stalling tactic here, really, for Thijs. And it's a stalling tactic that he kind of needs, honestly, because with 11 in play, Zephyrus in hand, xBlyzes is just kind of threatening lethal every turn right now. He's really not that far off.
And funnily enough, would you actually say that Galakron got the best one? Because it's just not the death rattle, right? So it just leaves, again, a singular minion on board.
Arguably,
Pretty good.
Yep.
And also, with just Zephyrus sitting there, waiting and ready to go.
You think this is your time? It is mine.
pretty lackluster Murozond, but Thijs does have a backup Murozond in hand. It's not like, that was his big play plan, but there's that as well now. Along with the Smite.
Yeah, see him at Holy Smite looking extremely strong here.
And now is it Murozond again? Obviously, the targets won't be true or anything, but I just mean for Thijs to just make a board, because right now, there's not a lot he can do.
There's not, no, and that is kind of scary, because you, again, do still just leave 11 damage up in play most of the time, unless the Holy Smite hits perfect target, and even then, you're only cutting into 2.
He could go fishing with Madame Lazul, and we do see there would be a big payoff if he hits Shadow Word Ruin.
Or the Zephyrus, right?
Oh, yeah, but yeah, very true, actually, very true. Or the Death would be arguably, like, the best, worst one. Or, you know what I mean? Like, oh, none of those!
What happened here? That Madame Lazul just went straight down the middle. It needed to have a look around the edges.
Thy blood be born again.
I mean, amusingly, most of the answers Thijs wants are actually in the hand right now, so this Psychic Conjurer is unlikely to get anything done. Alright, sure, that helps. So now if your APM is on point, your APM's on point, and we know xBlyzes is, you can Plague of Death and get your attack in with your Silence minions before they actually disappear for max damage.
Oh, I was listening for a second then, and it was just a massive waste of time.
Yeah, it often is.
Zephyrus coming out now from xBlyze, going to be looking for the, I guess, the Shadow Madness is the target, and he does get it. We have seen, is it me, Solo, or have we seen like a strangely large amount of whiffed Zephyrus in the past few days and last week? Zephyrus, and I'm not saying like Zephyrus not giving the players seemingly what they were after.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I think that's the case. But again, like new meta, new cards, and obviously like the Zephyrus pool doesn't change, but you have to learn what Zephyrus thinks of every other card in the metagame, right? Because sometimes there's a board state where like there's a new card with a Death Rattle on it, for example, and you as a player were like, I would love to Shadow Madness that. But Zephyrus, not knowing what the Death Rattle is, doesn't necessarily want to Shadow Madness, and therefore you get kind of whiff situations, and that can come up with a lot of different interactions.
Yeah, and here's where all the content creators have been missing a trick since Zephyrus was released. Where's the Zephyrus card review for the expansions, right? Like, you just play it out as Zephyrus, and he can just tell you what he thinks of each card.
Nice. Yeah, I like it.
There you go. I mean, look, I'll offer that one for free. I have so many good ideas.
It's just Zephyrus reviewing a card, 1 star. You're not getting a Shadow Word Death Buddy here. Take this right wing. Yeah.
It would be sick. Yeah. All I want is a bit of credit. But that is going to be at least Thijs defended, and there, like I said, the Raised Dead hitting any of the big power plays is huge, and Thijs just has a Zephyrus in hand now, and it's still 2 more Murozond.
And that's insane, because that's not his Zephyrus. He hasn't played a Zephyrus this game. That's the one that he just soul mirrored and used to kill his opponent's Zephyrus.
Does xBlyze just know? Does he want another Zephyrus?
Is this a good idea?
xBlyze is doing it, so it must be. What's the payoff, realistically? He spends 3 mana on the Switch. He can play the Zephyrus, which will then give him 5 mana to play with.
Yeah. The problem is, no matter how impressive his turn is, he's giving his opponent Plague of Death as an emergency. So, like, it's never going to be, like, game-winning immediately, but it can still be game-winning in terms of, like, getting a key resource out of your opponent's hand and using it for yourself.
Yeah, and I am just wondering when this game just turned into Netherwing fights, because this is just an absurd amount of these, and the Death Rattle's on board right now. And they're probably not going to go anywhere anytime soon.
They're not Netherwings, Raven. Can't keep doing this.
What?
Dragonmore Skystalkers.
Oh, okay. The dragon is a Netherwing, okay? I'm just throwing it out there. Yes, the dragon itself is a Netherwing, yes.
Right.
I have that mountain, wow. Sorry. Apologies. I just call them Netherwings just because that's what I see on the picture. I'm a very simple person. So,
There's a board of a bunch of armor dudes and a fox thing.
That's exactly how you cast Soul. You called the new spell damage thing. That is your Drake thingy. Like,
wow. Mind control, huh?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, is Plague just too slow from Thijs? Because it is just saying to Blyze, okay, your stuff's gone. Have a free turn to start again? Oh my god. What is this game of Hearthstone? It's like 2014 Hearthstone.
It is, yeah.
And there was just mind controls all over the show.
I said last week that it was Blyze who was destined to be world champion. Turns out it's Artosis, after all.
So I was going to look at the Kronk's AoE buff when there is some kind of board, but it doesn't appear to achieve too much here.
No.
Do you think Thijs has to kind of break here and go for the Plague? Well, he doesn't think so.
Looks like he's just going to Kronk's AoE to sweep instead,
okay.
Yeah. Yep, the classic priest mirror interaction. The Kronks does both.
Mm-hmm. Or the priest versus rogue interaction.
Yes.
Whichever one.
Yes, that also does happen.
So here now, Thijs has managed to fight back and get on board. He is only on 10 health. He does have a Zephyrus and his like a second form of Galakron to recover some of that health as well.
Yeah, and it's the first time that Thijs has really felt like he's had a grip on the board in this game, which, you know, might actually be more important than the health totals, because I talk about how priests can be a little bit more aggressive now in this mirror, and they absolutely can. They can't do it from off board. The class just isn't equipped to be able to do that. It just doesn't happen. If you force them off board, you can have 3 HP and you're chilling most of the time, you know. So if Thijs can get a grip on the board state here, he should be feeling relatively.
Well, the Water Bear is going to help out a lot as well.
Mm-hmm.
Blyze could just hard pass on this though and just go for the Plague himself. It's a little bit unfortunate because he loses his card, which I believe is a Kronks in there.
Yep.
But this is a lot to deal with. I don't know if he has all the best answers.
Looked like he was initially leaning Dragon Queen Alexstrasza there, but then bailed out of it.
Yeah, I think he doesn't want Thijs to just be able to reset his health while he plays Dragon Queen, right? Which is what this Water Bear is going to do. So I do like this in that he just has to do something to clear off some of this board and try and reduce this healing down just a little bit. Because otherwise, it's a big chunk of his game plan just goes out the window, right? If he spent all this time, pushing Thijs so low on health, and it just resets. Now, Thijs has a lot of powerful tools in hand, but the hard part now is when to sort of divvy them out, right? Like, when is this Dragon Queen Alexstrasza hitting the board? When is he going to open up with his Zephyrus? What's the plan for Zephyrus? Is it going to be heal? Is it going to be removal? And all this time, he's still finding the mana to press this hero power. Pretty impressive, actually. I think I would have just jammed something a bit more aggressive right now.
No! You'll pay for that!
Clean clear from Thijs. Classic Murazond usage in the mirror, really, is just to duplicate soul mirrors most of the time. It's pretty much what it comes down to.
Okay, there is the goose in hand.
Oh, this is scary. Brave, reckless. Pick the word from Bly's side. Passing the turn back to your opponent with both of your 1-mana dragons still in your hand.
Mm-hmm.
That is a scary prospect against Mindrender.
It is, but I guess the worst that can happen is your opponent has a good play, but then they won't be able to play Plague, right? So then Blyze can just at worst respond eventually. But I guess it's just that little gap, isn't it? We can see there's a Plague in both hands, so there would just be a direct answer, and that's where I keep talking about the timing of Mindrender I still don't understand it because I think it always changes, right? So I don't think it's something you can have really a clear set of rules on. Now this Mali goes into Breath of the Infinite, which is why I think Blyze wanted to keep both dragons.
This is a cute little interaction, though. He's going to use the forbidden words with the Headmaster Kel'Thuzad. Very nicely done. Gets the full resummon as an 8/8 on the other side. It's not like a snapshot of the card is taken as you kill it. It resummons it in base form.
But this clear is going to be pretty nice in general anyway.
Pretty monstrous indeed, yes.
Breath of the Infinite. There's even just the Shadow Word Rune if he really feels like he needs it. Wait, what am I talking about? The spell damage? Yeah, I'm absolutely stupid. I just didn't even think about the Explorer for some reason. But yeah, of course, that just clears the whole board, and well, that's a good card. Bit of a...
He can't keep getting away with this, Raven.
Look at him though. Stefan straight away he just clapped himself and was like, "Oh yeah. This is how the plan was always being executed."
I'm the best. French Hearthstone #1 right here, baby. These are the plays you got to make.
Do you like the Battlefiend as well? It is immune to what you would expect to be some kind of board clear from Thijs. Obviously, it doesn't pop out and do much yet, but just using the mana right now and just getting that down, freeing up some hand space, looking pretty good. Once again, I feel like Plague is a bit of an issue in this matchup because whenever you do press that button, you're just saying, okay, this is gone. But if you have more stuff, I'm in the same position, but with one less Plague in hand. And it's really hard to make that up. So I do think this is why we see Thijs go for this Murazon because it might just give him more done.
Oh, he gets the bad order though.
Yeah.
And he is very nearly just dead. One off currently, I believe.
Yeah.
Renew can find the +2/+2. Apologies, can't quite remember the name of that card right now.
Ooh, raise dead for 10 damage to yourself. Is this the showboating from Blyze? Is he going to be like, look, I'll take 10 damage and still win?
That's actually incredible. I love that.
And you can play now, right?
Yeah, nice.
Now, Bronx to push extra damage. Still needs a couple of turns, but still, that is pretty fantastic. Apotheosis going to be able to land because these Valfiends is not procced yet for Thijs.
Mm-hmm.
And those dragons are pretty mediocre. Maybe even just bad.
Yep.
This timeline amuses me.
Raise dead again? More damage?
Yep. He's going fishing.
Not
He's
quite.
got a Dragon Rider Psychic Conjurer. Thijs' Natural Zephyrus is still in his deck for that Psychic Conjurer. Okay, not quite.
Pay for that!
Now the Apotheosis can start to have an impact.
Yeah, it's what he does with everything else is the issue, right?
Mm.
I actually wonder if it's Shadow Word Ruin, then Apotheosis trade. Just to keep the Valfiend a healthier total and kill off this Kronks.
Okay.
Because Thijs doesn't just need one swing with this Valfiend, I feel like. I think he needs more than that.
He doesn't know that though, right? He has no possible way of knowing that.
Oh, I'm not even talking about because of Brand. I think just because he needs to secure board before he can play anything, right?
I guess, yeah, sure.
He's been getting beaten up all game because he's not been allowed the board. So I think just having this Valfiend like almost die to the Kronks is Maybe a bit much. Oh, it's just going to go Zephyr to clear it now.
Wow.
Okay.
I love a good Zephyrus Soul Cleave meme. Kind of interesting because his Galakron is invoked to the level where it could have destroyed 2, so he actually had a pretty simple clear available with just Apotheosis and Galakrons. Clear board, 5 armor, bit of healing. But he went a bit fancier.
I had a question for you then. Was it ever worth the Shadow Madness first on the Zephyrus to just put another one in BlyzE's pool?
I mean, he's kind of out of Raised Dead stuff now, right?
I expect to see at least 10 more before the end of the game.
Okay, fair enough.
I don't know how and I don't know why, but it was just a thought, that's all.
More relevantly, Blyze has had a opportunity to play this Cleric Scales on maybe 2 or 3 turns before this point and has chosen not to because it does actually draw the card from your deck, which seems to indicate that despite me saying you can ignore fatigue a little bit more and try and push and be aggressive, Blyze is still preparing for the worst if it does go all the way to fatigue. So he's played it now in the first position where he didn't have a dragon in hand, just to get it out of his hand and get a 1/1 in play without actually drawing a card from his deck.
Yeah, I think as well, it's combined with the fact that he's never needed to play it, right? It's not like he needed to fish for something to, try and win the game or steady himself in a specific turn. So yeah, I think it definitely is just a combination of the both. But Thijs is going to get the good news, or the bad news, I guess. Here comes Bran. But there is an answer. There is the Ruin. There is the Plague if he just so needs it. Because he has to be expecting that BlyzE is running out of juice right now. Thijs has killed a ton of stuff.
I see the line, Raven. It's Cabal Acolyte, Shadow Word Ruin. You steal the brand, so eventually the brand dies for you, and then you res the brand.
Oh, the mind games.
Yeah. So now, on the contrary, the line is for BlyzE to Shadow Madness the brand and with the Pyromancer and find some way to get enough damage to kill it off, so it goes in his res pool instead.
You'll pay for that!
They break so easily.
Finally, the natural Zephyrus off the top now for Thijs. It's reached that point of the game now where Mind Render has to be incredibly terrifying because both players have drawn the majority of their deck at this point, so they're odds on to have it in their hand. And secondly, it's around the point of the game where you think, okay, this is going to fatigue. I need to start planning out, like, this card deals with this card deals with this card. Eventually, blah, blah, blah happens, and I have the last minion on board, so I win. Like, you always have to start going through that thought process when you start entering fatigue in a control mirror. Mind Render makes it a complete mess of all of that nonsense.
It really does, isn't it? But what's the... I mean, I guess Thijs should be more scared of Mind Render than BlyzE right now, because BlyzE's hand definitely does not look fantastic. And he can empty a lot of it already anyway. And maybe BlyzE just has to just go for Mind Render and hope right now, because outside of his hero power, things aren't really looking too great, are they?
Do you like to play with fire?
Dance, puppet. Dance.
Yeah. And Thijs goes to go, oh, that's a pretty good plan. I'm going to try that too. To a certain extent.
You think this is your time? It is mine.
Do you like to play with fire?
Yeah, is this going to be Zephyr Silence? See the pray from Thijs there. He was like, please, please just give me silence. Oh, okay.
Share your thoughts with the class now.
I wouldn't say intimately. I think that's probably a bit of a strong word choice. But I'll ask you one simple question here. Should Thijs play Mind Render here or not? It's just one card, Sol.
What?
Class dismissed. Now
Looks like it's going to be Disciplinarian and Gambling, and then Mind Render Elucia, which is going to flip everything around once again.
Yes.
Time is running out.
Does mean that xBlyzes now has access to the Plague of Death, but that was going to be true either
Yep.
way. But now, essentially, like, all of these mind renders will unresolve. So things eventually return to normal. It just takes extra steps in order to do so as all the mind renders resolve. There you go.
Yeah. Oh, Cobalt Spellkin. Not a bad pickup at all. Just for a little bit more juice. Ty's probably hoping for a renew. Just to, again, just keep some more value going, because we really have just edged towards the true end game right now.
Mm-hmm.
don't keep your thoughts to yourself.
Okay. That's a ton of value.
And also now the Plague was played by xBlyzes, which means Thijs does still have access to his. So even if xBlyzes says, okay, there's your turn, and I'm going to do the same but with Morozond, if Thijs chooses, he could just be like, okay, go away. And then he knows that xBlyzes is just going to be on further and further, like, less amount of cards and value, right?
Puzzle Dragon is kind of the level of juice he needs right now. Yeah.
You've got
I
me.
think I like the Mind Vision choice. Just hope that one of the other cards is more useful than that one, like the, yup, exactly, Cobalt Spellkin.
And also Crimson Hothead just being a nice little awkward minion to deal with here. Nice.
Last card in
Although
Thijs' deck is Time Rip, by the way.
You could also just go for the Inner Fire on the Spellkin and the 1/1 in to trade off this 4/6. Seems reasonable.
Maybe.
Because now we're going to see players start almost desperately protecting as many minions as possible on their side of the board, right? Because every single minion that hits face even once is pushing those fatigue counters to dangerous levels.
Yeah, agreed.
Oh, another Inner Fire and Radiance. It's just two 5/5s on the board for Thijs. Ooh, Sandtooth Waterbearer is huge as well.
A simple spell should
Once renews, I imagine.
And
Gets
Wave of
one.
Empathy. And that's kind of like a renew.
Yeah, I mean, well, so renew isn't just for the purpose of saving health; it's for actually
Yeah,
getting
of
other
course.
high-value cards that he can play. Like a hand of 10 Wave of Apathies right now is not going to win him the game.
This Vulpera could do some work as well for Thijs, right? There are some pretty high impact cards he could get offered, so he's going to go fishing. Well, Apotheosis normally is just good enough in almost any situation as long as you have a minion on board.
Mm-hmm.
Don't think he should worry about Shadow Word Ruin too much. Holy Nova often doesn't do enough. So yeah, I really like the Apotheosis pick here. The positive, I guess, is this Murazon will actually do a lot for xBlyzes this turn. Oh, okay, doesn't go for the Apotheosis, does less then.
Yikes. It's not the hits. And yeah, that's the problem, right? Is we've reached the point of the game where you can solve it down, so you don't necessarily have to be that scared of Murazond anymore, because you can just represent lethal and say, yeah,
Right.
play your Murazond and get 50-50 worth of stats. I'm just going to hit you in the head and you die.
Skeletal Dragon, no. Could also get Blyze something. The penance is going to help just a little bit.
I think Bly's just very much waiting to die here.
Yeah, and Apotheosis, what, the 5? 12? Apotheosis and Inner Fire does make one heck of a Sandhoof if he wants to go for that. Oh, okay, well, there we go.
Reliquary of Souls. Just to put the final nail in the coffin. Not quite lethal this turn, even with like maxing out the damage with the Inner Fire on like the Volpira Scoundrel with the Apotheosis. He's still short. His fatigue for 2. He's still some way off. Yeah, the only thing Thijs has to be careful of here is just not feeding a Murazond turn that will clear his own board. Outside of that, he's got everything pretty well covered, and despite Blyze looking like he was being gifted every edge in that matchup, he got the fast start. He got the Dino Tamer brand to be threatening lethal for the majority of the game. Try as he might, he cannot defeat Swag Thijs.
Exactly, and I think Thijs there just maybe showing that, look, you're doing great, but let's not get ahead of yourself. Some of us have been doing this for many years and been doing it well. So pretty impressive there. And a tough game, because at some points it looks simple. Blyze is rushing Thijs down, putting a load of pressure on. But once it starts to just edge towards that, okay, we're both going to end up just playing out the whole deck here, like that does get hard, because the second someone just takes one big slip, it does spiral out of control, and we did see that. Thijs was the defender throughout most of the game, but he had the one turn where he cleared the board, healed a bit, and then suddenly so much of Blyze's resources went into the aggression that he's just naturally a little bit behind in value, and that did start to snowball. So Thijs does take the win with that Priest, which does mean he is going to be locking in Priest once again, as this is last hero standing, and Blyze is going to have his Mage or last week's Druid available for him to try and take down this series. So it's going to be a pretty tough one. I think we spoke about Thijs' gaps in his lineup, but winning that mirror, I think, was absolutely huge for him here.
Yeah, I do. I think it's a pretty big mirror to win, for sure. It generally is in Last Hero Standing. If the series in particular kicks off as a mirror, it ends up being hugely important. Although saying that, like, even if you end up in a situation where your best counter queue is the mirror, it's crucially important that you do end up winning that matchup. So if a mirror match occurs in Last Hero Standing, it's likely to be pretty important to the outcome either way. But Blyze here is going to fall back on the Mage. Thijs, as you mentioned, Last Hero Standing, back in on the Druid, since this is essentially winner stays on. On the Priest, and Blyze is going to be showing some of that skill that carried him through with the Tempo Mage last week, as he was one of the few players I've seen so far that has not been getting caught out by the rope at any point while playing Mage.
Yeah, most people obviously wouldn't have seen this as it was in the our caster GM Discord, but Sol did mention during Asia Pacific about what kind of punishment should be given out for players who start turns with Mage or with Apprentice, start them as the rope is burning and not beforehand. It was very funny to sit and watch.
And I meant every word of it, Raven.
One thing I will say here is already Thijs has some spicy choices, is look at this opening hand. To me, Thijs has all the tools to lock down any of the early pop-off turns from Blyze, or even some of the early tempo turns you can make. With this Cabal Acolyte, the Wretched, the Wave as well, even arguably a Renew adds on to that as well to help with these spell bursts. And the Lazul, Thijs is in a good place to start this game, and again, looks to be pretty solid going into this second game.
I was just about to say, I do really like Counterspell in this matchup, but never over a Ray of Frost when you have 2 Mana Cyclones in your hand.
Right.
And then Blyze just says, nah, fam, Counterspell. I'm shocked.
Well, the interesting part to me is the timing, because Ray is going to be good almost whenever, right? Like, that's just a good card. You can play almost any turn of the game. But Counterspell, whilst Thijs is sitting on coin, when xBlyzes plays this, it's going to be huge, because if Thijs gets to just burn the coin into it and then go off with his big play, then it's not really done that big a job.
Yeah, agreed. Generally, Counterspell puts in work in this matchup. When it comes off an evocation, when it comes off a mana cyclone, on a turn where you've already popped off, so you've like made a board, killed their entire board with your Ray of Frosts and Brain Freezes and whatever else, and then you end the turn, you do your generation with your evocation or your mana cyclone or whatever else, boom, Counterspell, sick. All right, that locks out the Soul Mirror or whatever else. Like, taking one this early in the game when you don't have board, when you're actually kind of fighting from behind on board, and when the alternative option was Ray of Frost with 2 mana cyclones in your hand, like that seems kind of bizarre to me.
It does, but now the coin has been used by Thijs to be able to just free up some hand space more than anything here.
Yeah.
With that Spellkin helping towards that. It does mean Xblyzes is going to get a little bit more power out of it. There are still cheap cards that Thijs can kind of just throw away to a potential counterspell.
Yeah.
It's not as it's going to be a little bit worse for Thijs after having used this coin now. I was just quickly looking if there's a way for Thijs to maybe guarantee the steal on the Raz, because that would be almost game winning. I feel here with the Cabal Acolyte and the wave.
Yeah, agreed.
You can trade one entity, one mirror off, but that's it. So maybe he just trades and tries to set up to do it next turn.
It's possible. It's also possible that's all just too cute and you just fireball the Raz and move on with your life instead.
Oh no, I've got a better idea than that.
Okay.
What about Mind Flayer?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just get your own Raz. That's my plan. I was wondering, because I think Raz is a really tough minion when it's against Mage, right? Mage, I think, struggles to deal with it quite a lot. I did wonder if it was worth maybe just one turn of taking a bit more damage to just get that Mind Flayer charge down, and Thijs can have his own taken away.
Meanwhile, xBlyzes does find the Sorcerer's Apprentice, is going to go for the pop-off here, and then boom, that's how it's done. Not even a third of the way through his turn.
And also, xBlyzes does now just have a Fireball and a Pyroblast in hand, which often the Pyro is like a bit of a jokey comment, but it might just get there.
I think Pyro's very real in this deck. I think it should be talked about basically every time it does get generated. This is kind of what the deck does, is it plays its powerful things out that start in the deck, and then you kind of have to look and readjust as to what your win condition is from that point based on what else has happened. And if one of the things that's happened is there's a Pyroblast in your hand, that gives you a pretty good instruction as to where your game plan should be going. Oh, not that one!
Still though, Thijs now has a Sorcerer's Apprentice. His spells in deck are reduced by 1.
Yeah.
Because of the Incanter's Flow. Like, not bad.
It's pretty good. And this Renew Radiance turn for 0 that's come as a byproduct of the Sorcerer's Apprentice has kind of shut down this Fireball Pyroblast plan quite effectively.
Yep. And now Thijs will be planning to, now that he's arguably stabilized, he could just plan on just picking apart xBlyzes' deck. Because there's nothing too threatening now. There can be a giant coming down, but maybe it's just me, but if I play 1/8/8 against a priest, I never expect it to live. Even Highlander. I just never expect it to survive, because what are the actual odds on them not having one of their many removal tools?
Roughly this game right here. Yeah. I mean, it is there, Forbidden Words, but that seems like a pretty ugly entire turn, if you ask me.
Is it?
Yes. You can just do the same thing with KT, right? And just steal it away.
I was just wondering, like, let's imagine this much better turn did not exist, right? Like, if Thijs just kills an 8/8 with one card, passes it back, he still has a lot of options going forward. And I know it's not the most aggressive play on the board, but I think just stopping XBlyzes is priority number one for Thijs. I mean, this is definitely much better, though, don't get me wrong.
Yeah, but say he just had Wave of Apathy and didn't have the Headmaster. I think I still just would have waved and then just played some minions myself as Thijs.
Okay.
And just, potentially dealt with it later. Because, the Forbidden Word's the big thing, doesn't necessarily go away. Like, you can just always make that play. The bet is just whether you can get further ahead or further behind on board before you do so. And I think I'd be willing to bet in Thijs' position there that he could get further ahead while doing it.
Yeah, there is a big difference this week from last week, I believe, though. That Blaze is running a natural Conjurers in his list. And I think last week he wasn't, correct? So
that's right, yeah.
He has moved on to one natural Conjurers, which would, again, been a small fear. But
that's fair.
Blaze has gone off a little bit now, and this is the next push. And he's just got to hope. If that looked... it looked like a good turn from Thijs. Well, he's just got to hope that there's just no more waves of removal, because this is quite the board from Blaze, actually.
It is.
Is not your turn. Your mind is not your turn.
Nice.
Well, that makes life awkward.
Grave Ruin. Yeah. And there's the counterspell payoff. So, again, there were... I don't even want to say better, but other good options for Blaze much earlier in the game. Maybe that counterspell's helped out a lot now. Gets to keep the
counterspell ended up being absolutely insane. Like, maybe he's just a genius.
That's what I mean, right? Like, to me, the Ray of Frost are absolutely huge, but it just doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. I don't know what we can say, because Blaze just picks counterspell way back when he gets offered Ray of Frost as mage in the early game when he had Cyclones in hand.
Yeah.
Picks the counterspell anyway versus Priest with a coin and still just wins him the game, pretty much.
But here's the thing about that pan out, though, right? It ended up being really sick, specifically because Thijs' hand was Murazon to steal your Sorcerer's Apprentice, in which case, okay, I'll play every cheap spell in my hand because I've got a Sorcerer's Apprentice.
Right.
So because he then didn't have any cheap spells left in his hand, he just got wrecked by counterspell. Like, how do you plan for that pan out? How do you know that's the line? I don't understand what's happening, Raven. But I think, like, I'm actually not sure about Thijs' turn previously as well, because it looked like he was pointing his grave rune at his taunt minion, which was kind of...
I believe so.
It was always going to be a disaster if he did that, because he'd given the thing to XBlyzes as well. So XBlyzes was just always potentially going to be able to steal it in that scenario. So I'm kind of confused as to what Thijs' plan was to stay alive at the end there anyway, whether he actually had any better plan to be able to stay alive. But either way, it's just another ridiculous XBlyzes game of Hearthstone.
Yep. Again, more and more games I just want to go over and watch a few times before I really get to the thick of it and learn some pretty deep things here. But this is 1-1 here. XBlyzes on this mage once again. He has slain Thijs' Priest, which means Thijs is going to move on to this Demon Hunter, which is the Soul Demon Hunter that has been catching up catch up a lot in popularity on ladder as well recently.
It has, yeah. Still, as of yet, not really performing at the Grandmasters level, though. Although I think this matchup and the sort of more mid-rangey rogues, the not like ridiculously aggressive rogues, I think are the bread and butter for this Demon Hunter. They're able to just race so effectively against decks that have no resiliency, no real defense. They just have the few ball clears that they need to make sure they don't die too early, and then boom, just 1,000,000 damage going to your face, and you have no way to defend against it.
Yeah, one thing that is pretty important to keep an eye on is timing of these Eldrazi Warblades. It's generally not a weapon you just throw down on 3 and start trading away minions into, because you can heal you can easily swing for 10 plus damage a turn in the mid game. Well, normally way more, but 10 is easily reachable. So it's not only the 10 swing, but also the 10 heal you can get later on. So it's a pretty huge card to keep an eye on here.
Really nice timing and sequencing here from XBlyzes. First off, the easy thing, he plays his spell first, and then he plays his Firebrand. So he's kind of chilling here. But secondly, this is the potential Marrow Slicer turn from the opponent. So he's saying to Thijs, if you want to play your Marrow Slicer on curve, you just have to slam them preemptively into a mirror image. He was, of course, weak to the Shard Shatter Mystic there, but at least that forced Thijs to play off curve theoretically. We can see there's no Marrow Slicer option in his hand, so Thijs didn't really sacrifice anything to make that play. But from xBlyzes' perspective, I think it was a good hedge to make.
Right, and I think, excuse me, sorry, Shard Shatter is huge because it is why this deck performs so well against these kind of small but wide minion boards that, say, Rogue makes with the stealth minions, Mage makes with obviously just most of their minions that aren't Mana Giant, and it's why the deck performs so well. That combined with Blade Dance and it's so easy to make just a 3+ attack weapon swing, it is huge because you get to just clear these minions up with very little issue. It's not like you have to swing one weapon over 3 turns to clear up a board with this deck. Interesting play there. He does have the souls, the soul fragments in the deck, I believe. So
no, he has 0.
Oh, is he on 0? Okay,
Yep.
Sorry. I thought he had like 1 in, but I was going to say, okay, that makes sense. If he had them, I think that would have just been Lapidary instead, and just build this slightly bigger board.
Frostbolt, huge card in the matchup. Probably not quite as big in this matchup as it is against Bomb Warrior, but certainly an incredibly useful tool if you need to try and set up some race situations.
Yeah, it's pretty flexible as well, right? Because you can use it to either stop you dying to a big swing from Demon Hunter, or to stop them healing with a big swing if you're setting up the aggro. So pretty powerful, but again, just tons more damage going xBlyzes' way. The heal bringing Thijs all the way back up to 29, and he still has tons of options. There's 6 damage just in hand with the twin slice and the second slice.
Yeah, and this is now not looking great at all, especially with the Marrow Slicer and with the Frostbolt really just having to be used to prevent 5 damage from the minion here. Like, we spent an entire metagame talking about how insane Frozen Shadow Weaver was as a tech card because Demon Hunter existed. And it wasn't just about locking out these big 10 damage attacks that were going to smack you in the face. It's because so much of their plays, of them actually engineering anything to happen, just involves attacking with their hero. Like, so much of their cards and their decks revolve around that. So if you can freeze their face, even for a turn, that's so powerful for you, but xBlyzes really had no option there. He just couldn't take 5 more in that situation.
And it's where it starts to stack up. You even see Thijs just kind of nodding there, just like, okay, well, there's 5 damage. Even if the board is cleared, there's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, there's a ton. There's pretty much lethal. Even if the board is cleared of minions here for Thijs.
There is, in fact, lethal, yes.
Yeah.
Know pretty much about it.
Pretty much. Same thing, right? Oh, that does look like mirror images, though. But again,
It does look like mirror images.
A card I do often just refer to, I don't even remember in test, I was like, just the best card in the deck for this Demon Hunter, for me, is just Blade Dance. Because it's just 2 mana and clear most boards up with a high weapon swing. It's so sick. I guess there's the awkward moment where...
1/1 taunt every turn for the rest of the game? Does it get there, Raven?
The Netherwing could get a taunt as well, right?
Uh-huh.
I think you go for it.
You can be whatever you want.
That's
Okay.
not a taunt, but the odds did just go down.
A true Soul Demon Hunter would Blade Dance this every day of the week.
I still don't think enough was made of was it the game in the Masters Tour where the Blade Dance did literally hit the 3/1/3s altogether?
The Magtheridon.
Like, no one really seemed to grasp how unlikely that was. It just happened. Everyone was like, oh, yeah, that's pretty lucky. No, that's insanely lucky.
Channel
What do you
your
mean?
inner Demon Hunter, okay, Sol? That's just how it works.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, okay, let's be honest. If he misses both entities, that means he kills all of the threatening minions. So it's even the bad outcome is fine.
It's so much damage not going face,
It
though,
is.
based on the contents of his hand right now. And the 1-1 taunts are going to keep coming.
The
And he has
skull backup is huge, though.
He has nothing left on board after this turn to be able to challenge those 1-1 taunts individually.
There's still a Shard Shatter in the deck, along with another Blade Dance, though, right? So there are still cards he can dig to help him deal with this. Thijs is running a double Spectral Sight list, which isn't super common, but again, just more and more and more card draw. But you are right, Blyze, with that potion. I think Blyze is so good, he baits the potion, not the other way around.
Yeah. Exactly.
So Blyze is just quickly becoming the Chuck Norris of Hearthstone, isn't he? He's going to just clear this all up, though. And a second skull. At this point... Oh, really?
Ooh.
Just funny watching going, no, yeah, it's just going to be a 1-1. Is Blyze coming into both? He's only playing one, so scared of a big Blade Dance? Needs
The
to
other one's
hold off.
The other one's a 1-1.
Oh, of course, it's potioned, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, good target for Conjurer's Call if you can get hold of it quickly, but
Exactly.
he's running out of time.
Yeah, it's actually why he's holding on to it.
Yeah,
It's not relevant on board really as a 1-1, so he might as well hold on to it for the Conjurer's calling out.
Put some soul into it.
I would expect. Okay. I was wondering whether he was just going to put a swing into that instead of and keep an extra 3/3.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think there was too much punish to not do that. That's just going to be game. Thijs taking the victory with the Soul Demon Hunter and flipping this series back on its head now. He's leading and he's going to have to queue that once more. Blyze kind of just got dismantled in that game, but as we pointed out, the Shard Shatter along with Blade Dance, it does just negate so much pressure that the mage can put on in those early turns. So if you get one or the other, it can be pretty solid there. But the Skull was the backup that Thijs really needed. If he went for that Blade Dance and didn't have Skull of Gul'dan to help refill his hand, then he could have ended up trying to just hero power, hit face, pass every turn, which was not the way to go.
Yeah, and I think you can probably hinge the way that early game went on that one decision where Blyze chose to tempo with the mirror images first and then drop the Firebrand behind the mirror images, which played very specifically around Marrow Slicer, but didn't really pay too much attention to Soul Shatter, which, you can have your argument over that. But I think, potentially it's a bad matchup to begin with. I think like saying, okay, this is your on-curve play, I'm going to set up to beat that, and then maybe I have a chance. It's probably a decent route to go through the matchup. But as soon as Thijs had the answer to that situation, it did seem like it was a very, very uphill struggle for Blyze. And he tried his best in the late game. Like, I did actually kind of like that potion setup to give him, like, persistent taunt over 2 or 3 turns. But it just wasn't going to be good enough, especially against the amount of card draw that Thijs is packing in his deck. Some versions of this deck can gas out. Thijs's very much doesn't look like it's going to.
Yeah, the one Vulpera, which a lot of players are messing with a ton of different tech choices here. But although Thijs is running double Swampoos, the double Spectral Sight and the Vulpera just help out with that so much, as you mentioned, just with that little bit of extra card draw. But Druid can be a bit of a tough matchup.
Sorry. It's just, Blyze submits last week's Druid, still has KT in it. Most people don't. First game, boom. Coin, innovate, overgrowth, KT. All right, let's go. Game of Hearthstone incoming.
Or is it?
Mm-hmm.
As I mentioned, Thijs in these weaponless matchups, he's just hoping that these oozes at least perform valiantly as a good Bloodfen Raptor in the early game, but as Sottle is giggling like a little schoolgirl at Blyze's hand, we do have to look at Thijs and see now if he's going to pull the trigger on these Warblades. It looks terrible. It is pretty terrible, especially when there's a Marrow Slicer next turn. But he could go Warblades and then plan to Cane and then just get the swings out for damage and then go into Marrow Slicer. It hurts a bit, but it is a curve that deals the most damage over time.
I think For me, Kayn is too important a card in this matchup. My experience in this matchup is mostly from the Druid side. But in my experience, the thing I lose to is Kayn, and if I can make them play Kayn, I feel so comfortable then going into the late game and just being able to drop big Iron Barks on things, you know, big... I've forgotten the name of the taunt. What's the name of the taunt that's free when you play a big spell? Anubisat Defender. We play like huge Anubisat Defenders with Survival of the Fittest and all those kind of things, and there's just not really a way to pound through minions that big if the Kayn is already committed. So personally, for me, I think it's a really important card in the late game.
Yeah, I definitely do agree. There is even warranted to just swing and play Marrow Slice at this turn, just lock it
he's
in. This is scary though, as you pointed out. The games I've lost as Demon Hunter is when I'm like, okay, almost got him, and then 18 beats come down. I'm like, oh no, I didn't get him, and it's just a bit of a problem as you mentioned. So it's like Kayn lives for now, although.
All right,
Okay.
so next turn
No!
is... Oh, God, no. Next turn is Kael'thas, Innovate, Bog Beam, or Kael'thas, Innovate, Iron Bark, Overflow with hand space, and then could theoretically get 2 more procs on huge spells, even with the change to Kael'thas now, where the third spell costs 1 and not 0. We were talking about it in the intro yesterday, where Raven asked me how I thought it had changed, and I specifically described these kind of turns as where they actually felt like they had a bigger impact. When you do multiple pop-offs with Kael'thas over and over again, that's where things start to become a bit more difficult. But it's looking like Blyze might still have a pretty insane Kael'thas turn coming up.
Yeah, this is looking huge. We are going to get this spectator issue fixed. We do apologize. I think it bugged out after the disconnect. So we can see Blyze's hand, of course. And maybe we should just cast this, just looking at Blyze's hand, because now KT is about to go off. There we go.
Yeah, so he's going to lead Kael'thas, Bloom, Overflow, and then go from there, I would suspect. Does mean he's going to lose 1 card, but it's the only real way he can do it while rationing out maximum cheap spells. He did almost whiff. He picked up a Guardian Animals off his last draw for the next payoff for 1.
How many does he even have left? Oh, he does
And
have 2
now-
animals left, okay.
He does have 2, which now gets him even more card draw from that Twilight Runner. Nature Studies can now be an additional payoff. Wait, Fungal Fortunes? What on earth?
I think he might want to just empty his deck and then play Ysera. Right?
Sure. Yeah, okay, I can see that.
Because then Demon Hunter doesn't blade dance a board full of dragons normally.
Yeah, this is kind of the scenario that I'm talking about. And, okay, don't get me wrong. At no point playing a game of Hearthstone should you plan your turns around Druid having like a 6-proc nerfed Kael'thas turn. Okay, but similar boards like this can materialize in a lot of ways, right? Like just Ysera Ironbark. Boom. It's a similar board state that you have a problem with, which to me is why Kayn feels like a much more important card in the late.
Right. But this is also something I've run into a lot, right? Thijs has Kayn in hand. So what, I guess, is that, like...
Play
Kayn has
Skull,
to
build
be-
up damage, send it face?
Right, but then do you just die at that point? Because
Yeah,
you do
sure,
have to get towards that damage, and if your
Sure.
opponent's played a big board of taunt and plays Survival of the Fittest, like, unless you've just suddenly... Unless you've gone turbo in the early game and you can one-swing them, Kayn only opens up that window once and then it dies. And that's the problem. Sometimes the health just isn't quite there and you can't quite reach. So Thijs definitely on the back foot now as Blyze is just playing a ton of whatever he wants.
Blyze just snap-picked Secure the Deck. Just really wants 3 claws.
I mean, it's 6 armor.
It is 6 armor, I agree.
Or it's just lethal soon, depending on how you look at it.
Yeah.
Such a beautiful shoes.
And this is where things get a little bit frustrating here, and for the Demon Hunter, is when you have to start hacking through minions in inefficient ways, right? That is 6 damage that could have gone face, but Thijs has to trade, and now Blyze is still on 18. Thijs has to use Skull of Gul'dan, which then isn't going to open up 18 damage for him next turn, which means it's another turn away from getting close. All the while, Blyze is going to start just chucking super high-powered minions on board.
Yep, that is his first survival of the fittest with 3 cards left. He does play a second copy, which is also in his bottom 2. But at this point, it's just huge taunt minion after huge taunt minion, right? Because I think the other remaining card in the deck is the second Anubisath Defender at this point.
Right. So, Thijs has to go Spectral Sight, I think, here. And he has to get a proc for Magtheridon.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, okay. That's not so bad either.
Magtheridon, Soul Shard, and Blade Dance is a potential clear. Not this turn, but following up.
Or even, depending on how many minions Blyze plays, just the Twin Slices, Lapidary, and Blade Dance on its own, right? As the damage will be really high.
Yeah, sure.
Well, basically, Thijs has one turn to completely obliterate Blyze's board, and then a still small window to win the game.
Right. Oh, apologies,
The
actually, it's the
Iron
other Guardian Animals. The other Anubisath Defender was burned. I forgot that Blyze has been burning cards this game, and he was drawing so furiously.
I knew a Teacher's Pet was burnt, but that's all I kept my eye on.
Yeah.
So, is Thijs a homing missile Blade Dancer? Because he's going to need it with this Magtheridon.
It's a shame that Blyze couldn't draw immediately there, because that actually would have been kind of checkmate. If he could have drawn at least one card immediately and just filled his board most of the time with big dragons and not had the space available for Magtheridon to summon the waters.
It's definitely something I think a lot of players, including myself, had to get used to. Is Magtheridon doesn't say procs when you kill all of the ones on board. You have to kill 3, and if 3 don't spawn, unlucky. It's not going to sit dormant forever.
You have to kill 3, and they have to very specifically be 3 on the enemy side of the board. There's lots of scammy things that you can try and do with like Shadow Madness or various other business. None of it works. It's got to be those 3 minions that you summoned on their side of the board.
Mm-hmm. Well, this... hold on. I think this just has to be a go for it with Magtheridon, right? Oh, I guess you can still... Wait. Can't do it now. I don't know what he was... I'm not sure what he was drawing for. I think there was a point where it just had to be the Blade Dance there. That caught me off a little bit, I apologise, but Blyze took the win with the Druid. Who cares if you submit old lists? Still gets the job done.
Absolutely does. He did. Thijs still had the Shard Shatter available in his deck, of course, which up to a certain point you can spend mana, draw cards, and still have the Shard Shatter available. And I guess the point that passed is around the point where he couldn't go for the other option anyway. So maybe it's kind of about the same thing. Which, you know, it's a pretty discrete assessment at that point, right? How many cards do I have left? What are the odds of me drawing the Shard Shatter in the first 2 or 3 draws, or however many I had? Versus what's the chance of a 1 in 6 plus a 1 in 5 plus a 1 in 4? It's probably more likely that you draw the Shard Shatter at that point, right?
Not if you believe. That's the key pit that Thijs was really missing out on there. But we are going to be going down to the last game, and maybe this is a very fun last one to go down to, because we're going to see, you know, last week's Druid versus this week's Druid, I guess, and Blyze. And maybe might be the matchup where he does get a bit punished for, you know, that mess up he had this week in deck submission, submitting an older list. But we did see KT go off that game. But when your opponent is playing with similar power level cards with the ramp, then maybe this is where it slips just a little bit.
Yeah, I will say the key factor in your approach there is that if your opponent gets to play with similar power level cards based on the ramp, Blyze so far has seemed like an absolute lord when it comes to drawing Wild Growth and Overgrowth. So there's a very, very good chance from my perspective that Thijs does not get to play with the same level of ramp that Blyze does in this game of Hearthstone.
And also as well, funnily enough, Thijs is playing that Malygos list, as you can see now, with the Moonfire in hand, which I feel is not that good versus a Survival of the Fittest Druid, even a, you know, arguably nerfed version of the list, because the Malygos feels a little bit too fancy when you're threatened by, if they play Survival of the Fittest, do I just die? You know, there's a lot of setup required that I think the other Druid doesn't give Malygos time to do.
Breath draws the breath, not the dragon. No ramp so far for Thijs. Bly's just going to put a problem on board. It's a play I do love doing in the Druid Mirror. Just occupy your opponent's turn. Yep.
And is this enough, Saul, do you think, for the Bog Beam Moonfire response? Thijs can't go for it, right? It costs him a bit, but I would be personally terrified of Gidra. I guess the argument is, well, the most he could do is a 4-mana spell, but if the overgrowth is there, that is terrifying.
Yeah, so you say, oh, the most he can do is a 4-mana spell, as if that's no big deal. Like, what do you mean? A 5/8 Wind Fury on turn 3? That's scary.
Last week we cast a Survival of the Fittest Gidra, okay?
That's true.
I have a lot of expectations from this card.
That's true. It was a different world back then, Raven. Not quite as impressive.
Why did see Blyze just wait till turn 10? Here, though, you're speaking of quality and equal hands, but neither of these players are really going off on the old ramp, are they? Thijs in 4 mana and not a lot to do. Maybe coin into the Twilight Runner is just worthwhile to try and get to the rest of the ramp next turn.
It's fine, Raven. Blyze always draws Lightning Bloom off the top this turn. Every single time. Never worried. Literally never worried. Literally never worried. Never doubt me. Nothing that I say ever.
No, Salt, please. I doubt you. I never doubt Blyze.
People are addicted to it.
Filth! Actual filth! Put the kids to bed. This is adult content happening right now.
The worst part here is the Twilight Runner plus Swipe plus Moonfire still doesn't kill the Kel'Thas.
Just dead!
What if?
Look at Blyze's smug little face. He loves it, doesn't he? The best part of that was the realization that he drew and went, wait, KT is nerfed. Wait a minute, it's still enough mana! Blyze is already looking at the deck lists of what his next opponent could be.
Does that make me 2-0 in the predicting Blyze will do godlike things standings, by the way, Raven?
Maybe. I don't think you can count it as 2-0 against me, because I didn't know we were actually playing that game.
That's true. That's true.
It's like I've made 0 predictions about this because I didn't know we were playing. But yes, it does. But if your predictions that Blyze does good things, then your predictions are about as bad as mine used to be.
What's happened?
A lot of things got cast.
Sorry, what's happened?
Thijs just really wants a little cute 1-1 on board, but there's going to be a well played there from both players. Blyze got the bloom he needed and took the series 3-2 over Thijs, and he continues to do it subtle. A very close series at that, but he does make it work, and even with this Druid, he just can't lose.
I want to know who's pulling the levers. Like, we used to blame Ben Brode for pulling the levers, then it was Chucky for a while, then it was Cora for a while. Like, do we blame Gallon now? Is that the new meta in terms of blaming people for things that are going on there?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
That's what we're going to blame it on. We pick a new person every year or so. It's great. But no, really incredible result from Blyze. And this does not mean Thijs is out this weekend by any means. That was just our first match of the day. So he's going to be sitting in the lower bracket waiting for the loser of our next match, which is going to be Bunny Hopper versus Felkane. And Felkane is a first foray into top 8 in this Grandmaster season. Bunny Hopper, though, already was here last week. He's here once again. And as we mentioned at the start of the show, for me, Felkane has to be, I don't want to say afraid like Felkane's worse than everyone else, but this is the problem where if any of these other players do so well, or whoever does do well, Felkane, and everyone else are going to have that much harder of a job getting into that Division A.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm happy to see him back because he was a player that I really, really enjoyed watching last season. I think he impressed me He impressed me a little as a player, but he impressed me enormously as just an entertaining character to watch on stream. And what I'm slowly realizing, moment by moment, as I cast all these French players, is that I'm actually completely okay with this French takeover of competitive Hearthstone. Because they're actually all great. Like, Swids has become really entertaining to watch. Yep. Felkane is really entertaining to watch. Blaze, indisputably, just has the most insane games of Hearthstone that you can ever watch. So, yeah, sure. If everyone's going to show up and play like this, and if this is what we can come to expect from A-Rock and Wama as well, I'm all for it. 16 French players. Let's go.
There'll just be a new Hearthstone Grandmasters division, right? There's just Europe, Americas, Asia Pacific, and France as its own thing. But maybe they'd all win too much. I don't know. But his opponent will be Bunny.